Hi, my name is Vasilis Stamatiou and I'm the head instructor and founder of Storm Russian Combat System. Our school is based in Athens, Greece. I am Greek and I started training in Russian martial art around late 2005. Actually, I was among the very first people that trained in Russian martial art here in Greece. Of course, the first style of Russian martial art I was exposed to was Sistema. I was introduced to Sistema by my longtime friend and teacher, Spiro Katsigiannis, and I will tell you more about him just in a few minutes. But for the moment, I'll tell you that he had already some experience with Sistema. He was also he had trained in various martial art styles to that moment, Judo, Taekwondo, Eagle Claw Kung Fu. He was actually Greek national champion for 2 years in a row in Sanda, the Chinese combat sport. He even competed in the World Championship in Hong Kong. And he also became an instructor in Filipino martial arts. And gradually he was also awarded instructorship by two Russian martial arts styles, Sistema and R.C.S. Anyhow, we trained closely with Spiro for about 3 years, like 3 times a week. In the meantime, attending international Sistema seminars and events whenever we could. And around 2007, we became aware of another source for Russian martial art instruction, which was the video series by Scott Salmon, who used to be the USA representative of another Russian system. I just mentioned it before, called R.C.S, founded by a great martial artist, General Alexander Retwinsky. So we immediately began to incorporate elements of R.C.S in our training, and of course R.C.S methodology through Scott Salmon's experience and explanation. We began gradually adding some Sambo stuff as well, since R.C.S has heavy Sambo influence. Well, around the same time we started a small training group around 2007 in Athens, blending all our different early influences in a Sistema R.C.S kind of hybrid, if you know what I mean. Shortly after that, Spiro left Greece and he went to live to Sweden for the next 5 years or so. And while in Sweden, he dedicated himself to the research of old Soviet sports science and the study of biomechanics as analyzed by Retwinsky himself, and of course the work of other Soviet scholars on the subject through books and writings that by the time there were some of them available through the internet for study. Spiro also trained a number of times with Retwinsky himself, the man himself. And here you can see a picture of the two. This is Spiro Katsigiannis, and of course this is General Alexander Retwinsky. Eventually, Spiro came up with a complete methodology of teaching motor skills and biomechanical efficiency for athletes and martial artists. And he called that methodology, after some years of research, he called it Dynamo Concepts. So Dynamo Concepts is not a martial art, it's not a sport, it's an educational platform, let's say, that aims to enhance athletic performance and also power generation for almost all kinds of physical activity. Through the ongoing process of interacting and learning from Spiro, I can now say that Dynamo Concepts became, and still is, one of the cornerstones of Storm Russian combat system, and probably its most important single influence. Gradually I also became a certified instructor in the Dynamo Concepts methodology, the martial art aspects of which is now incorporated into the Storm Russian combat system. In 2013, together with Spiro, we opened a school and a gym called Dynamo Club here in Athens, Greece, and at that point Spiro was already exclusively occupied with teaching and coaching athletes for strength training and powerlifting and conditioning also, and by this time today he's actually one of the most successful coaches for powerlifting and kettlebell sport in Greece. So in Dynamo Club I started to teach officially my Russian martial art program, and although briefly I called it Sistema, or more accurately Sistema Combatives, that was a title I invented, but after a while I just realized that I could not use the term Sistema anymore for a variety of reasons, but the most important one was that I just didn't teach Sistema anymore. What I did, was not Sistema. So what I teach today and what Storm Russian combat system is basically an amalgam of Russian martial art influences from schools such as R.C.S, Izvor, Russian all-round fighting, which is a family of folkloric combat sports from Russia, also known as RAF, R.A.F, and to a lesser degree also Sistema, obviously, of course Sambo and combat Sambo, old school Soviet boxing, which is a very interesting form of sport boxing, freestyle wrestling, some certain influences from mixed martial arts, contemporary mixed martial arts, also influences from contemporary self-defense schools, what we would call combatives, and all these filtered and explained through the Dynamo Concepts methodology, which, as I earlier said, has its roots in the Soviet sports science, and the martial art aspect is heavily rooted into the ROS system by General Retvinsky. For this eclectic style, I chose the name Storm, a word which is common in English and Russian, and I think it really suits well the style and mentality of the system that I teach. Storm Russian combat system, I would say that is a rather aggressive style. I firmly believe in training all ranges of fighting, hands and feet striking, and clinch and wrestling, and takedowns and throws, dealing with the ground and dealing with weapons in that order. Let me say it again: striking, punching, elbows and everything, kicking, clinch, wrestling, takedowns, ground and weapons, in order of importance to my view. I teach to the beginners standard boxing techniques and also a couple of easy sambo throws to begin with, because I believe that this kind of stuff, a couple of good sound boxing strikes and a couple of good throws can be useful and applied effectively, or somewhat effectively, even from the first month of training, which is something that I consider very important. Contrary to many Russian schools, I proceed to teach concepts only after the new student has acquired some foundation, a certain level of basics, a proper way to throw a couple of punches with sufficient power, and score one or two easy takedowns against a resisting opponent. After that point is where I start to teach concepts. Before that, I teach straight technique, and biomechanics. So I do teach techniques, and I also, of course, teach concepts. And I believe that a combination of the two is the most efficient way to teach people, especially people with no previous martial arts experience. We do our fair share of soft work, that is training in slow speed, which is very common in most Russian martial arts schools. But we also train a lot at medium to high speed, often with light contact, and sometimes we do full-out sparring. We use protective gear, we use gloves, MMA gloves, we use mouthpieces, and we use headgear if we must train hard, all right? And we also do many what I would call alive drills, which is open-ended drills with speed, light contact, and a small amount, just a small amount of resistance, focused on improvisation and problem solving on the spot, usually within some scenarios. So it's not full-out sparring, but it's not just a dead pattern drilling either. I do not believe in mysticism or secret strikes or exotic moves or religious powers or invocations or anything like that. To me, if a style of teaching fighting does not look like actual fighting, then it's not good. If you want, you know, secret techniques and you know, some secret Spetsnaz stuff and obscure powers, then I'm not your guy. Because on the other hand, I do believe firmly in power and athleticism. You know, I'm not a young man, but I still train almost every day. I lift weights and do my strength training and my conditioning. I hit the heavy bag, you know, I do everything. And in my school, we always do basic strength training, exercise in every session, no exceptions. We will always have in our training program, every training day, in every session, we will have just a couple or 3 strength training exercises. Physical strength and power generation are hugely important in fighting, and in my school, through strength training exercises, as I said, and applying proper biomechanics, martial art biomechanics, we try to attend both needs. I also believe in aggressiveness. So once the fight is on, okay, avoid the fight, but once the fight is on, I believe in aggressiveness. In my view, self-defense is about overwhelming your opponent, not just sit there and you know, defend or trade punches. In my view, it should be totally one-sided. That's the storm argument, you know what I mean? You should absolutely storm your opponent, you know, and end the fight without him even knowing what happened. There are various techniques and tactics, but attack and overwhelm is our main strategy. Another big feature in a storm system is the ability to flow freely between techniques, tools, and when I say tools, I mean punches or elbows or knees or kicks or grabs or takedowns, and ranges. Flow can be achieved mainly by what I think is the most important element, the most central element in the philosophy of storm. The ability to operate from a holistic, unified biomechanical platform from which striking, kicking, wrestling, takedowns and everything else works. Understanding how your body works efficiently is what creates your natural flow. And this is one of the great goals of our system. Finally, I want to emphasize the fact that Storm is an ever-evolving system, because the art of fighting itself is constantly evolving and developing. The way people conceived fighting and self-defense like 30 years ago has nothing to do with today's understanding of the same subject. So we all are truth seekers, That's what we are. And if Storm stops evolving, then I will have failed. Well, I sincerely thank you for your support, and I hope Storm methodology and training ideas help you in your own development, training, and martial art journey. Train hard, keep your eyes and your mind open, always ask questions, and try new things. Thank you very much, or as we say in Greece, ευχαριστώ πολύ.